Hello, everyone. My name is Tim Zick. I'm the project manager for the Niwot Ditch Diversion and Fish Passage project. This virtual meeting is being recorded on November 11th, November 12th, and will be available to potential bidders November 18th. Along with this recording of this meeting, we will also be having drone footage available that will show aerial footage of the project site. And there will also be other opportunities to interact with the project as well through a question and answer period and other options as well, which we'll go through a little bit. So just to give you a quick background on the need for this project. So, of course, we had the flood in 2013 that did substantial damage to large parts of not only Boulder County, but other surrounding counties. And the St. Vrain Creek in particular was heavily hit. And there was a ditch diversion structure that the Niwot Ditch Company uses. That was destroyed during the flood, and the surrounding area as well was heavily impacted. They did some emergency repairs to that to get that operational. But it wasn't really going to be sustainable. So we're now at the point now where we want to make that ditch diversion structure. We're going to rebuild that and also make it more sustainable so that it's going to be able to withstand higher flows in the future. So along with the ditch diversion structure, we're also creating fish passage through the area, through the stream reach. And that'll allow particularly native fish to be able to access all parts of the creek up and down through that area. Currently, there's quite a hydraulic drop there, which really prohibits them from moving upstream at all. So the other parts of the project that are going to happen as well is stream restoration and stabilization. And we'll be talking about that more in detail further in the meeting. So that's really what the project's essentially about. What we're going to do now is we're going to do some fairly quick introductions of some of the project stakeholders and partners and some of our Boulder County staff as well. So we'll start, we'll start with Tim Schaefer. Tim, if you'd like to give yourself a quick introduction.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Tim Schaefer. I'm a wildlife biologist with Boulder County Parks and Open Space. I've been involved with this project pretty much since the beginning and helped see it through design and all that. But at this point in the project, I'm primarily going to be involved in terms of regulatory compliance for environmental issues and plants and wildlife, and just sort of project oversight, making sure whatever contractor is out there doing the work that we're doing as minimal impact to the habitat and the local environment as possible, and everything is looking good from an ecologic lens.
Thanks, Tim. Barbara?
Hi, I'm Barbara Lino. I'm a Trout Unlimited volunteer, and Trout Unlimited is the fiscal sponsor for the U.S. and Fish and Wildlife grants for both the design phase and now the construction oversight phase.
Molly?
I'm Molly O'Donnell. I'm with the Boulder County Collaborative, which is heading up the funding from the CDBG DR side that is coming into this project, and I'll be talking about some of the regulatory requirements.
Thanks, Molly. Lucas?
Hi, everybody. My name is Lucas Babbitt. I'm the design engineer. I work with Watervation. Our firm is a sub-consultant to GEI. Consultants, they're the prime. However, they're mostly focused on environmental permitting related work, but we led the stream restoration and fish passage design component, and will be involved in the construction oversight phase as well.
Thanks, Lucas. Obi?
Hi, my name is Obadiah Broughton. I work for Boulder County as a resource planner. My main role in this project will be to help coordinate permitting, specifically kind of the local Boulder County permitting requirements and a lot of the state permitting requirements. And my role will be to work with the contractor, selected contractor, and Tim Zick to ensure we get this project permitted and out to construction.
Thanks, Obi. Deanne?
My name is Deanne Lambert. I'm a grant coordinator with Boulder County Parks and Open Space. And this project actually has 3 different grant funding sources. So I will be coordinating the reporting and the expense processing I will also be the contact for invoice payment. So.
Thanks very much, everyone. So I'm going to go through the ITB. Well, actually, first I'm going to just have a quick description of the project location. So if you're aware of this area, the city of Longmont is to the east of here on the map, and we've got the project location identified by the red polygon around here. Obviously, the St. Vrain Creek is going through that. So in addition to the project location, we also have a temporary stockpile location, which is identified down here. So this is St. Vrain Road, and the access for the project site and for the temporary stockpile location both come off here. It's approximately half a mile from here through to the center of the project site, down a private access road. And yeah, that's what we're looking at there. Now, excuse me for a sec. Moving on to the ITB itself. So I'm going to go through this, not word for word, thankfully, but I will certainly be highlighting some of the more important aspects and something that you should be considering when you're putting together your bids for these. So hopefully we hit the main highlights. And as I said, there's always going to be opportunity through the written answer period, written question and answer period for people to ask questions at that point. So of course the due date for the bids is December 16th, and that's when we'll be looking at those. I want to make sure that you see the link for all the attachments that's in there as well. And then so some of the things that you need to consider, especially as far as the schedule goes, is that on-site work, including mobilization, clearing and grubbing, will not be permitted to start until February 1st, 2021. There is a little bit of flexibility with that date. It's actually a grant requirement, one of the grants requirements, so it's possible we may be able to start earlier than that, but I think realistically, by the time we get through the contracting process, February 1st is going to probably be a fairly likely starting date. The project we want to be substantially complete by March 31st, 2021. And what that really means is that most of the design, most of the structural elements of the project should be complete, especially the ditch diversion structure itself. And we'll go into that a little bit more further down the document. We expect final completion to be done around April 20th. So a construction schedule and water management plan will be essential components of the project to allow construction to proceed within existing permits that protect the stream and Prebid's Mount Meadow jumping mouse habitat, allow for in-stream construction to work in the dry, and allow for water delivery to the Niwot ditch for all calls on the associated ditch from March 31st, 2021. Each of these components will be essential to the project and could cause stop work orders and or liquidated damages. We do have a backup plan for this, which we'll go through a little bit later on in the document, for if we're not quite ready to open up the diversion structure on March 31st. So as Deanne mentioned earlier on, we have three grant sources of funding for this, as well as our internal funding as well. So the Colorado Water Conservation Board has some money available. The state of Colorado through the CPW has some money available, and we also have the CDBG grant money as well. One thing to note on this is that the completion of all aspects of the project is contingent upon all sources of funding being approved and available. We're very confident that this funding will be available for this project. Excuse me while I scroll through here a little bit. One thing to note, especially if you're familiar with the county contracting process, is there's a little bit of a change, and again, this is due to COVID-19, but with the bid bonds, bidders should scan a cashier's check to be included with their bid. So that's to be included with the bid submittal, and then mail the actual cashier's check postmarked no later than the date of the bid deadline. That's a pretty important one, because without that, there's a good chance your bid won't be accepted. So as noted in the ITB here, this meeting and other information that we're providing, including drone footage and site visits as well, are entirely optional, which is not normal for this kind of project, but with COVID being the way it is, this is the way we've got it set up. So although it's optional, we expect that all bidders would view as much of this information as possible. So we highly encourage you accessing everything we have available. So starting at November 18th, this video will be available along with the drone flight that I mentioned earlier on. And so as far as the site visit, we do have a very limited access site visit available. And again, this is primarily because of COVID issues. So I'm going to read this for you just to make sure that it's clear for everyone. Interested parties should contact the Boulder County Purchasing Department at the address there to reserve a place at the optional pre-bid on-site viewing. Reserved spaces will be on a first-come, first-served basis. The meeting date and time will be disclosed when a reservation is made. This is not a public property. Access will not be permitted beyond the pre-scheduled pre-bid viewing. Reservations will only be taken beginning on November 19th, 2020 through the end of business, 4:30 p.m. on November 20, 2020. So if you're interested in doing a site visit, basically it'll be with myself taking up to 3 representatives over to the site. There will be no discussion while we're over there. It's really just a time for you to be able to take photos, make notes, that kind of thing. And there'll be a little less than an hour for that, which should be enough time. Again, attending this is entirely optional, but again, highly encouraged. So the other part is we do have the county will post answers to written questions, as well as a bid addenda as directed in this invitation to bid. Please note that the county may reschedule the optional pre-bid on-site viewing, terminate or modify the process at any time due to changing circumstances related to the current COVID-19 pandemic. The county representative will remain on site for the duration of the site visit and leave only after the interested parties' representatives have left the site. Access without county supervision is strictly prohibited. So with regard to the written inquiries, all inquiries regarding this bid will be submitted via email to the Boulder County Purchasing Office at the address there on or before 2 p.m. December 7th, 2020. A response from the county to all inquiries will be posted and sent via email no later than December 9th, 2020. An important one is please do not contact any other county department or personnel with questions or for information regarding the solicitation. And I want to stress too, that also includes the Niwot Ditch Company, which are one of the partners on this project. So yeah, just all direction needs to go through Boulder County Purchasing, which will be directed through me, and we will be responding through the appropriate way. So as far as the project schedule goes, the anticipated schedule, and of course subject to change, is December 2020 through January 2021 for permitting. And you'll note that it's December, so the date for bid submittal was December 16th. So it's quite possible that it won't be until early January that we actually have an award at that point. Although even with the award, we can issue a pre-authorization notice where the awarded contractor would be able to start some activity such as permitting, and we could certainly have a pre-bid meeting, but no work can start on the actual site until February 1st at the earliest. The project is supposed to be substantially complete on or by March 31st, 2021. So the selected contractor should be prepared to take all appropriate measures to ensure proper construction of all elements of the scope of work, including but not limited to substantial completion. Substantial completion shall be achieved when the work has progressed to the point where, in the opinion of the county, it is sufficiently complete in accordance with the contract so that the work or specified part can be utilized for the purposes of which it was intended. You should also consider cold weather. Obviously, we're in the middle of winter during this project, and also stream flow protection for the new grout. There's also wildlife conservation measures and other permitting restrictions that you need to be aware of. We're also looking at protection of the waterway from aquatic nuisance species and invasive weed introduction via construction equipment gear. And there are details on that, how we're going to respond to that. Of course, we're expecting the use of readily biodegradable hydraulic fluid. And again, we have more specification on that in the specifications. Allow willow cuttings harvested before bud break with less than 6 months cold storage or after leaf drop in the fall for project installation. Vegetation installation and establishment, including installation, watering and irrigation watering schedule until project is accepted and for the 1-year warranty maintenance period. So those are all things that you need to consider in your bid. One thing I want to emphasize again is that the project has been separated into 2 phases as is shown in the project plans and bid tab. We would much prefer to have both phases completed as one project. However, if bid amounts exceed available funding, priority is going to be given to phase 1. So as far as communication goes, I as a project manager will be the primary point of contact, and I'll help coordinate all communication between the design team, other staff representatives, permit representatives, private landowners, ditch stakeholders, and of course the contractor. Moving on to permitting. So we will support the selected contractor in obtaining permits and licenses. We've already started some of the process for some of the permits. And as we move down there, I'll describe these a little bit. So part of the phase 1 part of the permit is actually exempt from nationwide 404 permitting, but the phase 2 part of it, we need to go through the nationwide permit 27 for that. We're well on the way through the Section 7 consultation, along with the SHPO consultation is happening, and the NEPA review as well. And SB 40 is well on the way as well. So we have some local permitting through Boulder County CPP, and a big part of that is a limited impact special use permit, and there are a bunch of things that go along with that. So I'm going to go through these specifically, but you'll see those listed there. And again, as I mentioned before, these permits are going to be primarily the responsibility of the contractor, but we will certainly be assisting as much as we can through this process. So as far as staging areas go, the staging areas of the project site will be determined after contractor selection in consultation with our staff. We have a pretty good idea where these areas can be set up, so that shouldn't be too much of an issue. We also have a temporary stockpile area which is established across the road from the project access site, as I mentioned earlier on in the location map. And this stockpile area is to hold, we actually have the material there at the moment, approximately 3,605 cubic yards of upland fill material that will be used for the project. The temporary stockpile area it's going to be used for a staging area. It's more for just for materials that will be supplying as the project progresses. So for any construction water that's needed through the project, we've got some restrictions on that. At no time is a contractor permitted to use water from the irrigation ditches or St. Verlaine Creek or any construction or maintenance activities without a prior executed lease agreement granting use of those rights. So basically, any construction water is up to the contractor to acquire, and we can help out a little bit with that, but really that's going to be the construction contractor's responsibility. So as I mentioned earlier on, supplying the ditch water after March 31st is a priority. And assuming if we get to the point where the diversion system is not operable, the new diversion system is not operable, then we need a backup system. And what we're requiring the contractor to do is to design a water supply system for ditch water demands. So I'll read through this for you. The contractor shall plan and design a water supply system that will enable the supply of decreed water to the Niwot ditch and associated ditches in the event that construction work prevents the ditches from having access to the decreed water after March 31st, 2021. The contractor shall provide Boulder County Parks and Open Space the design and plan describing the sequencing of work needed to install the system no later than 14 days after the notice to proceed. Boulder County Parks and the Niwot Ditch Company must approve all aspects of the water supply system design and plan before installation can begin. The cost of all aspects of this work, including design, modification, design, implementation, and maintenance of the supply system until no longer needed, and removal will be shown on the alternative bid item GN 06001, GN 06002. Just a quick note on the operation and maintenance of the temporary stockpile area. As I said, this has already been set up. We have permits and everything set up for that as well. There will need to be a transfer of that part of things, but and we'll work with the contractor on that. Once the contractor is starting work, then the contractor is going to be responsible for any dust control, stockpile stabilization, any road sweeping that may be needed. Until the end, and then at the end of the project, the contractor will also be responsible for the demobbing of the stockpile area, which includes all work necessary to restore the area back to pre-construction conditions. And just a quick note on that too, we do have drone footage of that stockpile area, and that would certainly be part of any site visit too if people wanted to look at that. Dewatering. Structures that shall be constructed with work isolated measures in place, such as sandbags with plastic sheeting, inflatable coffer dams, super sacks and pumps to allow the work to be completed in the dry to the extent possible and avoid damage from hydrostatic pressure, flotation or other cause. The contractor is responsible for furnishing and installing the material and equipment necessary to dewater the work area. The contractor shall develop a dewatering plan and obtain approval from the engineer prior to the start of any work on site. The dewatering plan shall be approved by the engineer. Quick note on selection criteria. So once we get all the bids in, we'll have a team that will be looking through this. So in order to be eligible for consideration, a contractor must submit all information as requested herein. Omission of any required information may be grounds to reject the contractor's bid from further consideration. The selection criteria will include, but is not limited to, technical ability, capacity, experience, skill of the contractor and key team members assigned to the project, past experience of the company having successfully completed projects of similar size and complexity, quality and or performance of work provided on previous projects, references and recommendations from former customers and or design engineers and clients, financial ability, sufficiency of resources and bonding capacity to undertake and successfully complete the project, organization and completeness of the statement of qualifications, other relevant information provided by the contractor. Company selection will be based on the bid that provides Boulder County with the best cost and quality project. Ability to commence the project within 5 calendar days of the notice to proceed and the ability to be substantially complete before March 31st, 2021. A couple of points on insurance requirements. Just want to bring this to people's attention. It's sometimes missed. For professional liability or errors and omissions, insurance should be covered and maintained or extended for 2 years. And another important one is the pollution liability, and we require coverage and maintain extended discovery period for 3 years. And I just want to make sure that you complete the submittal checklist. This is important. It will help you organize your bid. and also ensure that all the required documents are included in that. So that's everything I have through the ITB. Obviously, if there are any questions about any aspects of this, then that can be brought up in the written question period. Lucas, are you ready to have a talk about some of the engineering considerations?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll hit on what I believe to be the critical elements, and please interrupt and chime in if I miss something, or tack on at the end. So I'll first kind of go over the major elements of the project and the design here. We're restoring about 1,300 feet of the St. Vrain River, as Tim previously mentioned. That's broken up into a couple phases, which are somewhat dependent on overall budget and what bids come in at. But I'll keep it the description focused on the entire project, and we can talk about phasing later. Again, so we have about 1,300 feet of stream restoration. Upstream of the existing diversion, there will be a little bit of fill material and earthwork required, but downstream of the existing diversion, there's going to be a massive amount of fill required. All that's obviously reflected in the quantities, but essentially everything down of the Niwot, downstream of the Niwot ditch is just in a big hole. So there's a good amount of work happening down there. Other big element, obviously, is the diversion itself. The existing diversion from the St. Vrain River into the Niwot ditch occurs at about station 5+50 on the plans. We're moving the diversion channel upstream a couple hundred feet to really help with the fish passage element of this project. The diversion channel will then ultimately feed the Niwot ditch. And in the diversion channel, there are two headgate structures that are shown in the plans. Then kind of working upstream to downstream here. And one of the most critical parts of this project is the boulder riffle structure at station 100. We essentially don't have any tolerance to work with there in terms of variability, because we are required to fulfill the water delivery and decreed water right to the Niwot ditch for a specific in-stream flow in the St. Vrain River. In order to achieve that, we have to set that first vein in the boulder riffle structure at a very specific elevation. So when we talk about stream projects in general, there's a little bit of variability in the construction phase because of unforeseen site conditions. We're working in a natural system, and you can't fully anticipate everything you're going to run into. But for that particular structure, there's essentially no wiggle room. So please keep that in mind. And then I guess while I'm talking about boulder riffle structures, you'll see a few others scattered throughout the project. They're essentially a series of buried boulder veins. These are not surface veins that will cause a cascading flow. They're buried. The intent is that they're not visible. They're intended to serve as buried grade control and to allow for fish passage. The only other riffle structure that we have is at the very downstream end of the project. We're calling it a reconstructed riffle. The intent is to use native alluvium to screen it to achieve a specific gradation. We want it well graded, placed, and then compacted when we're complete. Then the other big element of this project is the Toewood bank protection. I think several folks are familiar with this application by now, but to walk you through the general intent, this structure or this bank stabilization feature consists of about 4 feet of buried wood. When I say buried, it's essentially going to be at or below the existing water surface. And the wood is a combination of large wood and then slash material, limbs, twigs, and a material along those lines. We've obviously had a lot of wildfires in Colorado recently, and unfortunately we had a stockpiled source of cut logs that was intended to be used for this project. Since those are no longer available because they caught on fire. We are bidding this out and asking for, or this element out and asking for costs for the purchase and install of root wad logs. And that's again quantified in the spec package. We do have the project set up so that cut logs can be used as an alternate to root wad logs. So please keep that in mind and maybe present ideas you have about how those could be used or potential cost savings. I guess the last major element is a series of buried floodplain sills. The intent of the buried floodplain sills are to help mitigate the risk of an avulsion or essentially the channel skipping course and eroding upstream. We're placing these in areas where we will be filling the floodplain, the existing floodplain, and then revegetating it. So these are essentially an insurance policy while we wait for the veg to become established. I think lastly, we will be providing Cad files, and we'll make those available to the contractor. They're essentially going to be courtesy files. They will help you build the project, lay out structures. We'll provide our 3D grading model, but at the end of the day, the plans are going to govern if there are any discrepancies. So I think that's all I have. Tim, did I hit on all the critical elements there, you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah, I think we covered it, everything. We've got the Boulder Wall as well. Maybe just mention something about that.
Yeah, thank you. So the Boulder Wall is intended to provide the channel bank stabilization at it's essentially at the old or the current, but what will in the future be the old diversion point to the Niwot ditch. There's a lot going on at that interface of the project. While the diversion channel is going to be ultimately pushing water into the Niwot ditch, if during a flood event, the Niwot ditch or the diversion channel, excuse me, overflows, we've designed the system such that it will spill back into the St. Vrain River and not the adjacent property owners. That's why you see some buried soil riprap protection just downstream of that second headgate structure. And that part of the area project area is graded to transition flow over that embankment down back into the St. Vrain River. And then the Boulder Wall is intended to prevent the erosion of the main stem of the St. Vrain back into the diversion channel. So it's a pretty robust area of the project.
Thanks, Lucas. Tim, and I see Max on the line now too. Do you guys want to go through just an outline of some of the wildlife and protected species considerations, please?
Yeah, sure. So we're obviously working in a waterway here, which are pretty sensitive areas for plants and animals. And specifically here we have Prebid meadow jumping mouse, which is a threatened species protected under the Endangered Species Act in this project area. The whole project area up and downstream of the project area is considered to be occupied by Prebid meadow jumping mouse. And so we had to do a consultation with Fish and Wildlife Service, and they've issued a biological opinion for this project. And you should review that when you have the chance, as well as attachment F to the invitation to bid, which highlights it is the protected plants and wildlife conservation measures section of the bid documents. And just a quick overview of that, it really covers Endangered Species Act, Migratory Bird Treaty Act, and Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act. So make sure you review those. In general, the considerations for Prebbles are really minimizing habitat disturbance to the extent possible, using appropriate sized equipment to make sure we're minimizing disturbance and soil compaction. And a lot of the area will be required to, the contractor will be required to put up fencing to fence, I believe, the limits of disturbances as well as the limits of construction, but Tim will correct me on that. And the goal of that is really to make sure that we're confining the footprint of any ground disturbance to within the project limits and not extending beyond that. And really that's one of the biggest conservation measures to protect Prebbles is by protecting their habitat as well. And we've, again, through the consultation with Fish and Wildlife Service, we've really had to delineate the areas that we're allowed to impact and calculate the acreage of temporary and permanent impacts. So if we go beyond that for any reason, we just don't want to go beyond that for any reason, we'll have to reconsult with Fish and Wildlife Service. But there will be a mandatory pre-construction meeting. I believe that's correct, right, Tim?
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
Yeah, and in which at that time, the project foreman and then any folks that'll be on the ground will be required to be there, and we'll review again the conservation measures for Prebbles and kind of walk the project to highlight sensitive habitat areas that we want to make sure we're avoiding. And a big part of this project that is going to really be critical for stabilization of the project in the future for bank stabilization and the stream restoration is the revegetation aspect to that. And that's also a critical piece for restoring the habitat for Prebbles. So most of the impacts here, if not all, are expected to be temporary impacts. And so having as minimal of impact in terms of soil compaction and making sure that site prep and revegetation goes per spec is important. Not only for the stream stabilization, but also for Prebbles meadow jumping mouse habitat. So please review those conservation measures and make sure you're familiar with that, and you'll hear more about that if you're selected for the project. The active period for Prebbles is May 1st through November 1st. So this project is mostly going to be outside of the Prebbles active season, but we still have to be conscious of habitat disturbance there. Similarly, this for the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, the project is likely occurring mostly outside of the primary breeding season for songbirds, which is generally April 1st through July 31st. But if the project happens to go over for any reason, we'll have to make sure that we're doing surveys for nesting migratory birds to make sure that we're not impacting them. And we have specific criteria in here for how we manage that if that situation comes up. I don't want to go into any detail with it now because it's expected that we'll be operating outside of the primary nesting season. We will be operating, this project will be going on through the breeding season for nesting raptors though. At this time, there's no known raptor nest within the project area or the buffers overlapping the project area, but we have to evaluate that every nesting season. So within 7 days prior to any sort of ground disturbance or earthwork activity, you'll need to let Tim know so we can make sure myself or another one of our biologists can get out there and do a survey prior to earth disturbance, so we make sure that we're not there's no nesting raptors where their nest buffers, and those buffers are defined in the Colorado Parks and Wildlife's recommended buffers for raptors. Similarly, we don't have any known nesting bald or golden eagles within the project area, but that doesn't mean they can't crop up here in the next couple months as they're sort of selecting their nesting areas. So we'll need to make sure that there's no nesting bald eagles within the project area or overlapping the project area before construction. And just to be aware that if that comes up, that's sort of a constraint that we'll have to manage for as it arises. So that's kind of the big wildlife pieces there. We do have specific requirements and specifications for mitigating impacts of aquatic nuisance species. The St. Vrain Creek, this section of the St. Vrain Creek that's identified as the transition zone, is really an important fishery, and is Colorado Parks and Wildlife's one of their highest priorities for native fish conservation. And it really is a big reason or motivator for doing this fish passage portion of this project, is to really provide that longitudinal connectivity up and downstream for these fishes. Another piece of maintaining or restoring a good aquatic environment is making sure that we're not introducing non-native aquatic nuisance species. And so we have to make sure you pay attention to those specs in the document. Those species generally we have zebra mussel, quagga mussel, New Zealand mud snail, and they exist within the county. And so with this stream being so important for native fish conservation and just an important stream in general, we really take seriously minimizing the possibility or probability of spread of any of these aquatic nuisance species. And in addition to that, water quality throughout the project is a high concern as well. We really need to make sure that we're pay attention to our stormwater criteria, and we really want to avoid any sort of increased levels of turbidity in the stream, and make sure that we have confinement when we're doing any sort of concrete pours of that or anything like that, where there could be any sort of potential contamination of the stream. We're in that reach of stream where these sensitive fish populations are, and any sort of contamination of the stream could cause a die-off to already threatened populations. Mac, did you want to add anything to that?
Let me see here. No, Tim, that sounds good. Just want to mention, we're looking for, we're looking for something very special here with this project, as we're learning from other fish passage projects. So keep in mind, this isn't a typical build. There is some very specific kind of work that needs to be done to create a fish passable structure that we have designed. So just keep that in mind when you're working out here. This is it's more of a unique project than you may have seen in other designs. And I would just echo, yes, this is one of the most important spots on the river for recovering state listed fish that do not jump. So we're really excited to see this project go forward, and yeah, that's all I have to add, Tim.
Hey, thanks very much, Mac and Tim. Appreciate those comments. Molly, are you ready to talk about the grant that you're working on?
So again, I'm Molly. So I am responsible for that quite large CDBG DR addendum that is attached to the invitation to bid. So it's actually, we broke it down to be as user-friendly as possible with the amount of information that's in it. So it is broken up to forms that are going to be required to be submitted with bid, and then other forms that are going to be required to be filled out by the selected bidder prior to contract, and then forms for the ongoing project just for you to have. So the main three things that I just want to give you a heads up about at this point in the bidding process is that this is CDBG DR funding, so it's disaster recovery funding coming out of HUD, Housing and Urban Development. They are typically involved in objectives towards improving housing and economic benefits for low-income individuals, but they are increasingly more into disaster recovery and infrastructure. So because of that, they are very particular about certain aspects that help serve that primary objective. So one of the ways that they are picky about that is through Davis-Bacon reporting for employee wages. So this is a Davis-Bacon project. We do require weekly certified payrolls. We'll go through that process with the selected bidder. But as a heads up, I want to make sure that you know in your bid addendum materials to review the wage determination and ensure that if you don't have if you are proposing classifications to be used on the job that are not already there, that you also include the additional classification request form that is there, because we want to get that going as soon as possible, because it can take some time to get that approved from the Department of Labor. So get that in early. Any other specific Davis-Bacon questions I'll go over at the pre-construction meeting with the selected bidder. The other major piece that is a HUD specific thing is the Section 3 requirements, which you'll see in that bid addendum. Because they are injecting funding into infrastructure and want their primary objective served, they are interested in seeing if you have opportunities to hire subs or employees specifically to handle this job. They want to see that outreach is made towards what qualifies as a Section 3 sub, which is not mandatory, but we do have statewide goals that we're trying to meet. And if you're going to be employing new employees, that there are outreach efforts to hire low-income persons. So there's more details in your materials about that. Just so you know, that's what that is for. So make sure you fill out your Section 3 plan. If you don't plan to hire anybody, it's okay to state that. If so, then we'll be looking for some outreach information. And then finally, the main thing I want to mention, the third and final main thing I want to mention that comes along with that CDBG DR funding is debarment requirements. So this is a requirement of the bid, but the prime must be registered in SAM.gov and provide the DUNS number. And then down the line, as subs come on from the selected bidder, we will either do the same thing if the sub is already registered in SAM.gov and has an active registration, or we will have them certify that they're not debarred on a separate form. So just so you know, we're going to have to track that down from subs. And that's all I wanted to mention about that early in this process. And I will be here for questions throughout the procurement process with the selected bidder. Thank you.
Thanks, Molly. Hi, Audrey.
Hello.
So would you like to talk about ditch and water considerations, please?
Yeah, certainly. Apologize for being late here. My name's Audrey Butler, and I am with the Water Resources Department here at Parks and Open Space. And we have a couple considerations for the project with respect to water. Obviously, being a project that's going to help ditch infrastructure. Certainly, our group is here to help facilitate and work with Tim in terms of liaisonship with the ditch companies and things like that. If there are questions, we don't expect the contractor to work directly with the ditch company without including Parks and Open Space. So please feel free to loop us in as needed with respect to conversations and coordination with the ditch company. We've been working on this project for a long time now, so we have a lot of good inroads and contacts at those places. So with respect to procuring water for the project, it's incumbent upon the selected contractor to find and lease water for this project. At no time is the contractor permitted to pump or dewater without the necessary leases and permits in place. So that's a very big thing that we'll be looking for. And we do require that the contractor provides proof of the ability to use water either from the stream or from another source prior to the initiation of the project. So we are here to help out in case of, some insurmountable obstacle, but the onus is on the contractor to find that water and to lease it for the life of the project. And there are some good local sources. Obviously, we've got City of Longmont, Town of Lyons. So if the contractor needs ideas for where to lease water, we're certainly happy to provide some contacts for where to get that water from. With respect to that, there will be likely an accounting requirement. So the contractor should plan on how they plan to account for the water use that they are going to have for the life of the project. And the reports need to be also available to Boulder County so that we can certify that the water is being legally leased and used again throughout the life of the project. With respect to dewatering, there are a couple different components there. There's both a construction dewatering permit that's needed through CDPHE and a notice of intent to dewater with the Colorado Division of Water Resources. And so the responsibility is on the contractor to procure those permits and to have them up to date throughout the life of the project. If there's information or context needed with respect to those permits, I'm certainly happy to help out with making those connections. But again, that's the responsibility of the contractor to secure and keep those permits up to date and responding to the requirements set forth in the permits. So again, happy to help out with contacts and liaison work in this. And yeah, just any questions, feel free to send to Tim throughout the project, and I'm happy to help answer those. So.
Great, thank you very much, Audrey. Okay, so we've gone through the agenda, and now we're sort of at the end of it. I just want to give anyone that's on the meeting an opportunity to have any final comments, words of encouragement, anything along those lines.
Yeah, this is Tim Shaver again, wildlife biologist with Parks. I just wanted to bring up another consideration there, something to be cognizant of. We talked about aquatic nuisance species. We're also going to be watching for noxious weeds as well, and that's a requirement in the construction documents as well, to make sure that equipment is clean and free of any sort of mud or debris that might bring noxious weeds into the property. And so make sure you're familiar with those sections in the bid documents, as well as the biodegradable hydraulic fluid spec. That's a requirement of the project. Again, we're working in sensitive waterways that only pertains to specific equipment, but we will be looking for that before I think equipment arrives on site. So yeah, make whatever plans you need in your proposals or your bids to accommodate for washing of your machines prior to coming on site.
Yeah, good point. Thank you, Tim. Okay, so this concludes the meeting. Thanks very much to all the participants on our end, and we look forward to seeing some bids coming in and working through the process. Thanks very much, everyone.